Right, it's Real Bread Week and welcome to my kitchen. We're going to make some bread, give you an idea of how long it takes. I've got a clock running in front of this photograph. It's starting at noon and we'll just see how long it takes. I'm going to make a half and half loaf. White bread I like. Brown bread, if you want to make a brown bread, I would advise, particularly if you're a beginner, you don't use all wholemeal flour because you get a very heavy loaf. So I'm going to do half and half with the brown flour. It's a Canadian brown flour, so it's actually got quite a bit of roughage in there, and so the white flour will just help it raise and still be a nice brown loaf, but a little bit lighter than if it was just 100% wholemeal flour. Now the recipe I'm going to use is 500 grams, which is a bit over a pound of flour, 325 grams of water or thereabouts, because that can vary. Brown bread tends to need a little bit more water in. About 7 grams of salt and 7 grams of yeast. If you're buying yeast in box of sachets, then that will probably be a full sachet. I've got a tin, so I'm going to weigh that out. Don't use fresh yeast. There really is absolutely no point. It's very unreliable. It's just harder to work with. This sort of easy bake yeast, it's just great. Everybody uses it. Why shouldn't we? Time to mix. Now, although we're broadcasting this bread making on the radio, I'm going to put photographs on the WCRFM Facebook page and possibly the audio as a video as well. We will see. But if you look at this photograph, if you look now, I've got the white flour on the left, the brown on the right, the yeast nearest to us, that's 7 grams, and the salt at the far side. I have never put flour as neatly as that into a bowl before. It must be you being here, dear listener. Keep the salt and the yeast separately because they do tend to not like each other too much. The salt will slow down the yeast if it gets into immediate contact, so we put them in the bowl separately. And now it's time to add the water. Slosh it in. And there we go. I put a little bit more in than the recipe said accidentally, but it won't matter. So the time now 12:05, got the ingredients mixed. You can knead the bread by hand, use a dough hook on a proper food mixer if you've got one. That's what I'm going to use because we bought one recently and I've suddenly got very lazy. So the food mixer is doing its wonderful work, saving my arms. Oh, wonderful. Okay, the mixer's been going for nearly 2 minutes now and it's pretty much all combined in the bowl, so now it's starting the process of giving it a proper good kneading. Right, there we go. It's at about 8 minutes. I'd probably, if I'm doing it by hand, I'd probably do it for 10 or 12 minutes of bashing away on the work surface, but I think 7 or 8 is probably enough for this. Now, this is probably taking me a little bit longer just because I'm chatting to you and trying to make sure I don't forget anything and explain fairly clearly. Got a little bit on the fingers, but we're kind of 20 minutes in, and I reckon if I'd not been chatting and just got on with it, we'd probably be 15 minutes in now. The dough is sat there in the bowl. All we do now is leave it for a bit. I've got the clock here to see how long it takes to rise. Must show you this piece of equipment. The shower cap. Chaps, you've seen these on holiday in your hotels, thought, well, I don't need that. Bring your shower cap home. It's great for sticking on top of a bowl of rising dough. Right, time to let it sleep. Okay, so it's just over 2¼ hours now since I started mixing the bread. One recipe I read said leave it for half an hour or until the dough has doubled in size. Well, 2 hours is what I've left this to double in size. There's no rushing bread. Let's get it in the tin. It's fairly cool in here. I'm just shaping it, folding it underneath itself just to tighten it a bit. Just put a really fine sprinkling of semolina on the top. It gives a nice effect when it's cooked. And time for the shower cap again, and to leave it to rise up properly in the tin. So we can see by the clock that it's 5 on here, 5 hours since I first mixed the ingredients, which is about the length of time that I normally take with bread. I don't sort of rush it along. I could have made it faster if I'd used warm water, if I'd put it in a very low oven just to sort of help prove it along. But it does kind of taste better, and I think this is why it's important if you're reading a recipe to not take too much notice if it says leave it to prove for 1 hour or 30 minutes or whatever. And actually the slower it is, if you put it in the fridge overnight or in a cold room, the longer time it takes for the bread to rise, the better the flavour. And this is why the ultimate bread, the sourdough, when I make that, it takes anything between 24 and 36 hours to make. Yeah, 5 hours isn't that long really, is it? Time to stick it in the oven. I'm going to put it in for about 35 minutes on about 220 degrees fan, so I get a nice crust on it. So there we are, it's out of the oven. It's taken a little over 5.5 hours. You could do it faster. I reckon that if you're going to give 2 provings, then 3 hours is probably about the minimum. You could get away with 1 proving if you're rushed. That would take it down to a couple of hours. But it tastes better the longer it takes to prove. And you can probably see the little dusting of semolina on the top. There's hardly any put on there, but it just gives it a nice look. Let's tap it. All nice and crisp. It may lose the crispness as it cools down. I should say that you've got to resist the temptation to eat it while it's hot or you get tummy ache. You've got to let it cool right down. If you find that perhaps making bread for a special event and 2 or 3 hours after you've made it, it's gone a little bit soft, then just chuck it back in a hot oven for 5 minutes. It'll stay crisp for a few hours. And that's it. Making bread the easy way. Flour, yeast, salt, water. That's all. And heat. And time.